Oh, hi. Welcome to Creativity Robots episode number 5. And today is a really cool one because we got Scott Pansing, who's formerly been on Disney, Google. Scott has had sort of like a front row seat to all the way in which tech has disrupted media in the last 20 years, right? From Napster to Surprise generative AI. So we're going to go in a trip down memory lane. We're going to talk about some things that definitely bring a tear to my eye. Anyway, let's go ahead and let's check out the interview.
One of the reasons I was super interested in talking to you, you post a lot on LinkedIn about obviously generative AI, which is, kind of like one of the topics we discuss here. But also, you have like what it's interesting about you is that you understand creative, obviously, because of your background, but also you're someone that I can talk about the tech side of things, about the ethics side of things, because you've been involved in policy. And as we discussed in previous conversations, kind of had a front row seat to all these crazy changes that are going on, right? So I want to start with the beginning of your career, right? Because you started working for Capitol Records as a
Yes.
producer, building that I love. Used to work on Vine and Selma, so I'd always look at it, So I'm kind of jealous you got to work there. So
Yeah,
Scott,
speaking of
how was that?
having a front row seat to change, I started at Capitol Records 3 months after the launch of Napster. So I was totally in the Capitol Tower at Hollywood and Vine in Hollywood. And, basically the Capitol was a part of EMI at that time. I think now they're part of Universal Music Group, but this was a long time ago. And they were as part of the Record Industry Association of America, the RIAA. It was like basically having a front seat to Rome as it was burning. I mean, essentially, the record industry at first was like, MP3s sound terrible. No one's going to want this. Then why is everyone doing this? They're stealing. Let's sue them. It was very bad PR for, I mean, we remember like Metallica went in front of a Congress.
I was mad at
People
Metallica. I
were,
was
right. I mean,
mad.
I think people eventually understood like this is bad for musicians, this is bad for art, but the way that it was presented at first, especially like I said, the industry was kind of like, well, we're going to come out with the next piece of plastic. It's called a super audio CD, and there were mini CDs. Like they were trying to kind of level up the quality. Whereas, and it's true, the first MP3s, like they were, a lot of them did sound really it was poor quality, right? Now you have like, with the streaming, you figured it out. It's lossless compression. But I was also at Capitol Records when the iPod launched and sort of the iTunes store with digital download. So yeah, I saw a lot of change at Capitol Records at that time. I was basically making websites. That was my job there.
Yeah, and then you go to Disney, right? And you work there
Disney.
as an interactive producer. And this is kind
Mm-hmm.
of where I feel like your career starts kind of like dabbling into this technology aspect. Obviously, you're working on websites, so the technology was there. But I do feel, and you'll correct me because you know better, your profile kind of starts dabbling a bit more into that technological aspect and policy. Is that a correct assumption?
Yeah, I mean, at Disney, what happened was Disney had backed the right horse in a format war, which was what's going to happen? What's the next DVD format? And there was like HD DVD and Blu-ray, and it was kind of like VHS and Betamax. It was like which one's going to win? And Disney backed Blu-ray from the beginning. And so, yes, when I got there, and basically my role was to be a part of a large, or actually a small group of people that were creating these interactive Blu-ray menus, kind of the next version of what's a DVD menu look like. And essentially, yes, because it was such a new technology, and there was like a Blu-ray disc consortium, and you had like the CES show in Vegas, and it was kind of like there were a lot of technology partners, Panasonic, Sony, like people making and then, of course, Blu-ray was the kind of foundation for 3D television that was supposed to kind of take off there for a while, too. They required the Blu-ray format to play these 3D movies in the home where you would have to wear glasses. Didn't take off. Um, but yes, there was a lot of, to back up, basically the reason why a lot of us were very excited about this was though people didn't really, and the first Blu-ray players didn't really have Wi-Fi, but they had an Ethernet cable in the back. And the deal was is that the Blu-ray specification required that every Blu-ray player provide the opportunity for a network connection. So all of a sudden, formerly DVD player, which was like a dumb box that just played a piece of plastic, like an old cassette machine almost. Now if you wanted to, you could hook up the internet to it. And so the Blu-ray menus had the ability to have dynamic content that we could push out. It also meant that you didn't necessarily have to have everything completely finished. You could, instead of before shipping the DVD, obviously all the bits needed to be on the disc. But now it was like, well, we can push some of the bits once provided someone, obviously you wouldn't put something that was critical to playing the movie or like not put something critical on there. But if you needed to update something on the menu, you could update the menu later. And the language of Blu-ray was called BDJ, or Blu-ray Disc Java. So yes, it got very technical, and it was really exciting to be a part of that time, which basically Disney and a couple of other companies, including Netflix, were like really pushing the boundary of what's going on. Basically, even like Netflix, back then when they were launching their streaming service, and they were dealing with apps as well. Now we know it as an app, but I don't know if a lot of people remember this, but Netflix would ship you a disc that you would put in your Blu-ray player. It was literally like a blank Blu-ray with Blu-ray Disc Java code on it that would then launch the app where you could stream Netflix. That was one of the ways you could do it. So we were all kind of figuring out these cool ways to use Blu-ray technology, which offered a network connection. One of the things we learned at Disney especially was that people kind of just want to watch the movie. They don't want to play whatever Pinocchio word game we'd come up with the remote control off of the menu. That's not why people bought the movie or the diamond edition of Pinocchio or whatever. They just want to watch the film. But there were plenty of other things that Blu-ray could do, like bringing up like you see now, even with Amazon and some other technologies, Prime Video, and then plenty where you can pull up dynamic information, like what actors are in the scene. I want to know what the actor's name is. I want to, these things, the sort of metadata that you could, and we could push the metadata again after shipping the disc if we wanted to. So yeah, it was a very exciting time at Disney at that time, when basically the launch of the Blu-ray format, and then you had this, many companies pushing a lot of money into marketing and launching Blu-ray to the public. It was pretty cool to be a part of that.
Well, when you were dealing with so many technological changes, at a rapid pace of change, do you notice that affecting the creative in any sort of way?
Well, I think there's a couple, like music, for example. There's like the old world was like people were listening to the music in the home, or then the more affluent consumer had like a hi-fi setup. So the engineers are mixing it in like the studio for like the hi-fi setup or the home. But then it got to where like people were listening to music in their cars a lot, or in their ears, right? So you had kind of like the creative, and I believe, audio engineering is a part of the creative process, and the musicians, of course, are the beginning of it. But, mixing music definitely changed. And MP3s were, a big part of that. How are people going to consume this? I think at Disney, I don't know about the filmmakers. I think the filmmakers were probably actually just really excited to see, full 1080p on like a 60-inch television. Like when that became like common with Blu-ray, you're starting to get to where that approaches the quality of sitting in a theater. Like if you sit in the dark 10 feet away from a 65-inch television set with HD content, it approximates like sitting in a movie theater. It's not exactly the same, obviously, but if you have a good system, I mean, it's certainly better than what it was like in the 70s or 80s watching a movie at home, right? So I think the filmmakers were really excited about that. Where I was operating again was more of the people that were creating, and it was a very creative process, creating the menus and also like all the bonus material, right? So and that changed that world too. I mean, as far as like just the ability to, again, deliver it later to the disc if you wanted to, and also the menus could. We did some really crazy menus like Snow White. The mirror is a big part of Snow White, and you would fire up the Snow White Blu-ray, and it would like tell you like and this sounds very simple now because a lot of APIs and things do these sorts of things, but back then when the Blu-ray disc is telling you, oh, I see it's raining outside, or we were tapping into like weather APIs, what time it is, it would say good evening or good morning depending on when you put the disc in. If you had already watched the movie, the mirror would be like, welcome back. It was sort of like because we could tell basically with like something similar to a cookie whether you had the disc in before, what you had watched. Mm-hmm. And so this mirror in Snow White, which, people that were hired to animate the mirror from the movie. So it looked like the movie. I mean, mm-hmm. the mirror from the movie in when did Snow White come out? I should know that. I think something like 1937.
We'll add it from Wikipedia later.
But those were like pretty incredible things to do with just a menu where, it used to be just like, when DVDs first came out, like the menu was pretty rudimentary, like, some key art mm-hmm. and then play chapters, whatever. But we were pushing the boundaries of what, you could do. So I do think these technologies all did, again, not just musicians, not just filmmakers, but there's a whole ecosystem of creative people, audio engineers, people making Blu-ray menus, bonus materials. Like I said, there's a whole economy and a whole ecosystem of creative people, and everyone adapts.
Yeah, and speaking of adapting, help me understand, because from Disney you go to Google, right, to trust and safety, and you're a policy communication manager. Like, how do you bridge? How do you get in there?
Well, first, I went to Google, and then for about 9 years, first I was in YouTube advertising operations, and then I moved to policy communications, trust and safety, and that's more Google wide. I think really what was happening was, I was involved in loosely. YouTube is video and Blu-ray is video. It's delivering content. And so, I think it was more just like I was involved in the technical delivery of video. And then so the opportunity came to go to YouTube, which is also, we're in broad strokes, they have a lot of similarities. And so, and I was also very interested in just the like advertiser side of it. Ads make, Disney doesn't run on ads. Disney sells product. And so I found it interesting, like, hey, everyone's basically using we get it for free, the whole thing of like, you are the product or whatnot, but it's all advertising supported, right? Gmail, that's Google's way. YouTube, everything is ad supported. And that was fascinating to me. And at the time, when I went to YouTube, it was still pretty young, 2011. So, so speaking of things, having a front row seat to certain changes, whether it be Napster or Blu-ray, when I went to YouTube, the traffic to YouTube was like 80% desktop, 20% mobile. And everyone, not just YouTube, but Facebook and everyone at some point, I think 2012, 2013, even though the iPhone came out in 2007, I think, it took a while for like the app system and ecosystem development. All of a sudden, it kind of went, everyone's like mobile first, right? Because everyone started releasing the phone. And overnight, it was like 80% mobile, 20% desktop on YouTube. And to be at a sophisticated technology organization like that and see how they reacted and adapted to the shift to mobile, which really happened like basically instantaneously, it happened so quickly. That was pretty cool. It was a pretty wild time. So yes, a lot of YouTube in there. And then yes, I went to policy, starting to work on more like ads policy, but a lot of other things too, financial policy and some other things. But
you're a man that likes strong emotions, right? Because right now you're with AI, but you were with Capital when the music industry was legit changing, and then you go to YouTube. And as someone that has been actually made a living as a YouTuber, I know in the beginning, especially, the early 2010s, I started my career in 2014 in YouTube. And it was the Wild West. Folks, I remember going to pitch myself, in Argentina, like my channel. I got a YouTube channel, dear brand. Like, we could do things for you, and brands could be like, what's a YouTube? Why would I do internet video? So there was a lot of educating folks. But in your case, you were already working on the advertising aspect in YouTube, and you were working with brands just
Mm-hmm.
at the same time as we're finding out a lot about hot ads and the internet world, right? And brand safety. So folks
Mm-hmm.
might not remember now, even though it comes back every now and then, and definitely with AI, it's coming back, in the conversation, this brand safety. But you were among the first that had to deal with a brand saying, "Hey, Scott, like, why are or how do we know if our ads are gonna be showing next to a video that is promoting hate or those weird Frozen meets Spider-Man videos? Like, how was the conversation, especially in the beginning when you have a lot of education? Like, you gotta educate brands about what's going on."
Yeah, I think I mean, you're touching on what was a very, there's a specific time there. I think you're right. Like basically advertisers didn't really understand, at least, I mean, they understood, but they didn't understand maybe the nuances of where all of their ads were showing up, right? And then they slowly started to become aware, especially when media would start to, media meaning like journalists would start to
Mm-hmm.
highlight, like, hey, Coke, are you aware that your ads are showing up on this sort of thing? And then, you know, what happened was there was a I'm forgetting the exact year, but the policy changed quickly at YouTube, where they basically said things like, okay, all these people that were in the partner program, meaning you're a YouTuber and you get to partake in rev share, we're going to put ads on your stuff. We're changing our policies a bit. And you saw a lot of like comedy channels and a lot of people that would use profanity or whatnot. They were sort of like, you're out. Like there was sort of like, we've changed our policies, and a lot
Mm-hmm.
of people got demonetized, right? A lot of channels in the name of brand safety. And I suppose, I mean, just to and to throw this out there, like because this happened, I wasn't there, but I had already moved back to Los Angeles. But the building I worked in San Bruno, at YouTube, um, right there, 901 Cherry Street, like a disgruntled person who had a YouTube channel, she went in and shot people, right? I mean, that was like basically a really like this whole thing just bubbled up and boiled over,
Mm-hmm.
and that was basically a result of this whole. I mean, I'm not trying to. There's no blame here. I'm just saying that there was basically this that everyone these people became aware of this situation, and then people reacted and things were changed, and people's lives were changed, right? I mean, you had people who were making a living on YouTube, and then especially comedians. I feel like if to take it away from like the unfortunate situation with the
Mm-hmm.
person with the gun. Um, yes, a lot of people with comedy channels who are cussing, all of a sudden they're demonetized. That changed their whole livelihood. They had to change it up. But I did work on then what would happen later on. For me, I was sort of I had a front row seat to that. But as far as the advertisers I was working with, they were, happy to understand more about where their ads were going. Who doesn't like having the data, right? And so then what became part of my work was, okay, if something were to happen that shouldn't happen, like a piece of content should not have been monetized. Like, because on YouTube, there's a big difference between the terms of service to what can be on the platform, because you have sort of like a free speech thing, and then what's the terms of service for like what was allowed to be monetized, right? So
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it happens. I mean, this is the world is not 100%, right? So sometimes things would slip through and become monetized when they shouldn't, and then what would happen is an advertiser would maybe become aware that ads of theirs had shown on this objectionable piece of content, and YouTube was always very quick to take it down. And usually, when I became aware of it, the piece had already become demonetized. Maybe not taken down, but demonetized.
Mm-hmm.
And so we would have to, this is getting a little bit into it, but we would build like these impact dashboards, like to show the advertiser, like, plenty of times it was like, look, $7.14 of your ad was before it was demonetized showed. So yes, we're sorry, but it really wasn't that bad. That would be one example.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I was definitely heavily involved in brand safety for advertisers because, like you said, they became very aware of where their ads were showing. And then, of course, the product would evolve, and then the Google ads and video ads would, all of a sudden you could do exclusions and placements, and all kinds of like Google ads started to incorporate a lot of features for advertisers to be like, you could put up, you could have exclusion lists, like you could upload a whole list of channels and videos, either that you specifically wanted to show up on or that you wanted to exclude from a campaign. So they gave advertisers a lot of pretty sophisticated knobs to turn in Google ads as a result of all this brand safety.
In your case, again, you're someone that has kind of like a perfect combination of creative, policy, brand safety, tech. So how do you end up, right? You were in YouTube and then you go to Google. I mean, obviously Google owns YouTube, but like, is that where you get involved with AI? Tell me a little bit about your first steps with AI.
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly for me with AI, I just started, basically like a lot of people trying to wrap my head around it around mid to late 2022. And I think for me, learning, I have opinions. I've developed opinions over time, but I always want to learn about it, right? How do we learn? Like most people learn by reading or watching videos, and I've been doing obviously a lot of that. But I also feel like doing is a big part of it. So I'm not a software engineer, but I definitely have gotten my fingernails dirty with a lot of this stuff. I've downloaded open source models to a workstation. I have, for example, like Stable Diffusion running locally or things like that. I want to understand it. I want to start to, tinker with it, see if I can get it to do things, make mistakes. So I've definitely taken a pretty decent technical deep dive, I would say, into AI. But I would like to just back up for a second here, because AI, I really don't really like the term. It's a marketing term, and in my opinion, it's like, what is that? What are we talking about? Are we talking about natural language processing? Are we talking about machine learning? Are we talking about foundation models? Are we talking, it's sort of like, and to me, why I'm fascinated with it, and we've been to this through line that we've been talking about, is all these disruptions, whether it's Napster or Blu-ray or whatever. So this is basically, and to me, I mean, I am not one of these people thinking about artificial general intelligence and like, is it dangerous? Is it an existential threat to humanity? Like, that's for other people maybe to think about. For me, we're really talking about like day to day, whether it's the lives of creatives or also just the general day to day of people, right? In the economy or just in life. So it's essentially, we're talking about the next chapter in automation, right? And so when I look at that, I look at like, see, AI, I feel like people, that's, and I forget who said this, but it's like, it's AI until when it's never been done before. So what I like to think about is like Google Maps. Google Maps, if you were to tell someone 20 years ago, yeah, it's in your hand, it talks to you, it has the traffic patterns, they would be like, oh my God, that's artificial intelligence. But like, no, it's now that we've had it for a while and we're used to it, like most people don't think of Google Maps as artificial intelligence, right? So, so to take that further, like, okay, when I was growing up, I had a Greek grandmother and she barely spoke English, okay? And I really don't speak Greek, okay? Polylingual, very little. And but we would communicate, of course. But we never really had like deep conversations. And so, if anyone that's paying attention to what's going on right now realizes that we are very close to that grandchild and that grandparent who don't speak the same language, just like putting on some type of device or just using the headset, and they're going to have conversations in real time in their own native languages, and they're going to understand each other, like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy when they put the Babelfish in your ear or whatever. Like, that's coming. But that's not. We won't, once we're used to that, people won't be like, that's AI. They'll be like, that's talking, that's communicating, right? That's natural language processing and machine learning or whatever the specific things are. So, pardon the rant there, but like, that's basically how I feel about, like, I would be very like,
no, but
I feel like, AI is like, it's the media thing. It's like the hype. It's like you got to get into what's the AI play in the stock market. And like,
Mm-hmm.
are we talking about semiconductors and silicon? Are we talking about, essentially it's automation. And anyway, I've been doing a pretty deep dive, like you said, just in my own, like I want to know about it. I want to, like you said, I'm not one of these people that's like, look, I'm going to share with you my book on prompts for ChatGPT, and if you're not in it, like you're going to lose. And I'm also not a doomer that, although we're in LA, and I've been in LA since 1998. I'm very sensitive to the creative community's concerns around intellectual property being used to train products that then come out that people pay for, that then the output is then also disrupting the creative labor economy. It's very, it's interesting, and it's playing out in the courts right now. There's so many lawsuits, whether it's New York Times, whether it's, what I find kind of funny is that I think Stable Diffusion is now suing Midjourney, or maybe the other way
Yeah,
around.
or the opposite way. It's kind
Like
of like
what?
the Spider-Man meme, pointing at
Yeah,
each other.
totally.
And I
Yeah.
read a bit about it. I think they're scraping, one of them is scraping the something
Yes.
from the other one.
Something like that. That's right.
Lovely.
It's crazy. I think, well, we will see things like the real-time translator, like I was saying. We're going to see diseases be cured, of course. We're going to see some really fascinating and wonderful things, and it's a very exciting time that we're living in right now. I think that it's happening very quickly, and from my policy experience at Google, the hat that I try to wear is like, okay, I love this stuff. I also want to make sure that it's safe and ethical and legal. And I don't want to see, I think another part of this is like, again, not talking about it as AI, but talking about it as like the next chapter in automation. Content creation is a very broad term. And we've talked about this before this conversation, but like, keep the scale at which people can now just make things or generate things with these tools, whether it's someone else's voice. You have this whole like misinformation thing. You have all of that. You have it's an election year. You have that, all those concerns, but you also have like this, these like we talked about. I don't even know this is where this stands legally. I'm not a lawyer, but like we talked about this before. You have authors who put a book on Amazon, and then out of the woodwork, people that use ChatGPT or whatever, they will create these ebooks, these workbooks that are kind of like it's the crib notes to this author's thing. And like essentially then you go to buy that book maybe, and Amazon the algorithm is packaging them together like, hey, you should buy the author's book and this ebook. And the author's kind of going, hey, I never authorized like all these people to make these. And again, maybe it's freedom of speech. Maybe they're allowed to do it. I'm not a lawyer, but you are seeing the floodgates have just opened with all of this, like this crazy, people are able to create this stuff, generate this stuff at scale, whether it's TikTok videos where people are just talking about nonsense over Minecraft, or whether it's, there's just so many like bizarre things happening now at a huge scale because people are able to just, with a few keystrokes, the amount of effort required to churn this stuff out is now, like this.
Yeah.
Like this.
I gotta pause for a minute there because
yes.
you're bringing a very important topic that it's actually one of the. I have thousands of reasons to talk to you, right? But one of the things that you and I have been discussing a lot is this onslaught, in a way, of content pollution, right? I think that's how we are gonna end up, because again, as you said, I think trash content has always been there. Low effort content has always been there, so in a way, it's nothing we haven't seen before. But what happens now, for those that are less technically inclined or maybe not as much, on the day-to-day of this, is that if you go on YouTube, it doesn't take long for you to run into a video that it's basically a Reddit thread and a voiceover narrating, as you said, and in the background you see some like video game or, in a way, YouTube has sort of like turned into either,
it's the scale. What you're saying is that it's always been there. It's the scale, right? And it's not just that.
It's blowing up. So my question is, right, how do you think, because I'm sure brands are having conversations about this. I know production agencies are having conversations about this. And now I want to hear your theory, what you think, when you read about all of this. And do you have any idea how we can mitigate or prevent this? Sounds like, because the way I see it is like, you're going to have literally the floodgates being open and we're going to be bombarded with content and we only have so much attention, right? And we got trouble, especially the older we get, the more bills we need to pay, the more things that are kind of like distracting us, and maybe we don't have time to, go into a Reddit thread to find out how people feel. So, how do you feel? Like, is there a way for us to avoid this, or are we toast?
Uh, here's what I think. And this is a very good question. I think where it really gets to is another topic that I posted about just recently that you saw on LinkedIn, which is I think that people don't have the real data on legitimate impressions and interaction and interest. So, what I mean by that is, of course, if people want to engage with all of this content, that's how it goes, right? Like if people love this stuff, of course, people are going to say, well, then I'm going to use these tools to create this type of thing at scale because people are clicking on it and I get to make money and rev share. And that's just the freedom of like people wanting to consume what they want and we can judge, but it doesn't matter. However, it really does feel like there's and it not just feels like it, I don't just know how big it is, but these click farms exist, right? These like the data is incorrect when people, like if people are producing that types of content and they see like, oh, I'm getting paid, people are interacting with it. What people? Some real people, but some of it is just like literal like hundreds of thousands of impressions and clicks that are not legit, right? And this is like, there's articles about this right now. It's been going on for a long time. But again, this scale at which these people can do these things now is crazy. So I do believe there's a reckoning coming at some point because advertisers don't want to pay for illegitimate clicks and impressions.
Which makes sense. Makes sense. Totally. None of us like wasting our money.
No, yeah. And so I think what's going to happen is people are going to start to see like what are people really interested in? And are they interested in that? Maybe some people are, but probably not at the scale. And I think one of the places you can see this disconnect is like clearly TikTok and Universal Music were not on the same page as far as who's clicking on what or how important their music is to their platform, right? Because TikTok was basically like, hey, it's time for the deal. Your deal's up. Let's renew. And we believe your music is not worth as much. We want to pay you less for your music to be on our platform. And Universal was like, what are you talking about? Our music is, and they had and I don't know what data each side had. I have no idea, but clearly they both saw it from a completely separate perspective and angle, because Universal was like, well, we're out of here. And they pulled all their music off of TikTok, right? And all the publishing is about to follow. That's huge. Like someone made an error. I don't know who. I have an idea of who. Actually, I think TikTok made an error here. I think Universal probably understands the value of their content and that they were not being valued appropriately. And that's so big picture. To answer your question, I think what we're seeing right now is that it's going to take some time to play out, but people are going to really realize how many people are really watching this stuff. I'm not saying it's zero, or how many people are really buying the ebook, workbook, generative AI, like things that draft off of the actual content made by the author. There is some, but at some point it won't be, if we get to the real numbers, maybe it just won't be as profitable for people to churn this stuff out. And you'll still have it. Like you said, it's always going to be there. But the other things that disturb me are like, for example, it's not just this type of content, but child sexual abuse material, or CSAM. It's now the scale at which people can create synthetic media of that nature is scary. And you're, basically trust and safety and moderation teams, and that also use automation
and that happened to Microsoft recently, right? Like they were using their platform to create images that
I
depicted
mean,
child
the internet
abuse.
has some dark corners, right? Like there's some, and you don't even have to really go like crazy offline, like really deep into it. You can just go to like, you can, I won't say the websites, but like, you don't have to, if people that are looking for that type of stuff, it's just a different message board away or Discord area or
Yeah.
whatever. And it's not being moderated well enough to where all this like, stuff that is
Mhm. Even a
really
huge
terrible.
platform
Yeah.
recently had an issue in which these images somehow the algorithm missed out on it, and you had depictions of small kids with very explicit phrases on their forehead. And I think we'll have a lot of that in the future. So one question that I wanted to ask, based on
Yeah.
your experience, is do you see a future? And it's kind of like they say, never ask yes or no questions. So, Scott, I'm going to need you to develop once you give me yes or no, because it was
Okay.
an interview and say, never ask a closed question. And I will ask a closed question, which is,
Okay.
do you see a future in which platforms will be, because of this brand safety, but also the society backlash that I imagine there will be? Because also, it pays. This is a kind of news that the TV would love, because obviously won't anyone think of the children. But like, do you see a future in which platforms will be forced to policy more and tighten up the regulations when it comes to AI generated content?
If I have to say yes or no, I'm going to say yes, because I believe that if it keeps going in the direction that it's going, the arrow is pointing one way, and if we
Mm-hmm.
continue down that path, I believe it will get to a point where society and regulators, you know, we talk about we haven't talked about it, but we are talking about now almost like Section 230, right? This whole like law that basically allows tech companies to say we're a platform, we're not responsible for the content on here, and
Mm-hmm.
and it was necessary in order for the internet to grow. I see that, but and again, I'm not a lawyer, and I don't, but I believe that will. Let's just put it this way: they will take another real hard look at that if things continue the way that they do, because it just will get to a point where it appears like it may get to a point where things will just get, for the consumer in general, less attractive, right? If we can't use the internet without constantly running into this, let's call it digital pollution, as you said, eventually it gets to where it's like if it's not really usable anymore, that's a problem. So yeah, I think you will see. I think you'll also see, money also talks, right? Like you'll see, like consumers will start to probably ask for these sorts of things, and you'll have sites and apps and places that come up to provide. For example, I think you will see like certain products advertise themselves as our product. We have like an ethical approach to training our models. We haven't trained. You want to talk about foundation models in AI? You'll see products come out that say we licensed all of the IP that went into our training model, and all you creatives can rest assured, and we paid creatives, and you'll see like that will be attractive to some people, not just creatives, but some customers are going to be like, yeah, I want to support, creatives. I want to buy the product that's ethical or that paid artists or whatever.
It's
You'll
gonna
see things
be
like that.
like chocolate and coffee, right? I imagine a future in which things will have a seal of fair trade content.
Yes,
Authors would pay for this, 95% fair. The other five don't
totally.
ask or
That is a
tell.
That's a great analogy. Yes, you'll
Yeah.
see just like the coffee and chocolate, you'll have some sort of stamp of approval,
Uh-huh.
like rainforest this or free trade that, and
Yeah.
yes, absolutely. I think you'll start to see those types of, which is another type of labeling system for AI that is different from what people have been talking about, like with watermarking, which is another thing we haven't talked about, which I
Yeah.
sort of am not sure about. I'm not sure it sounds good in theory. I'm not sure you can like watermark all synthetic media and people are going to be able to remove it. And I was talking with someone, I think, or interacting with someone on LinkedIn recently, and we were the idea came up of like, well, maybe we are thinking about this the wrong way. Maybe we should watermark the original media, like watermark the movie or the TV
Hmm.
show or the book, and then all the synthetic stuff. If it doesn't have that Who knows? That's a tangent, but I know that
Yeah.
watermarking of synthetic media is also a hot topic in our circles. So
Mm.
I thought I'd throw it out there.
One thing people might not know is that you have your own podcast, right? AI Quick Bits. I really enjoy your last episode and the conversation about diversity because I was expecting the answer. Again, folks, go ahead. I'll add the link actually so you can all listen to this episode. And I don't remember the name of your interview. She worked for Google as well.
XIA. Yes, she did
Yeah.
work at Google. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, she was.
And it was it. I was listening to the episode and I found myself like pausing and going back to certain things because it was excellent, right? But one thing I noticed about your podcast is that in the beginning, your covers good feature images made with Midjourney. You know, I could tell they were AI generated, and then as you put more episodes out, that cover changed to a different one and maybe you like a picture. So I have two theories about that. And number one is just the fact that as you scale production, you need to find ways to spend less time, especially when it's a one-man operation. I deal with that myself as I do everything for this podcast. But the other one is like, and it's something that has happened to me, is that do you still feel comfortable using tools like, and again, not bad mouthing anyone, right? But like tools like Midjourney, Stable Diffusion, they have been among the ones that have gotten the most pushback regarding
Yeah.
how they source. So has that influenced how you use these tools?
Yeah, no, totally. No, I don't feel comfortable actually. No, well, let me put it this way. Like, I I don't feel comfortable putting out generated images really because I know that I'm sensitive, like I said, to the fact that the models were created with intellectual property that they just scraped from the internet. And I don't think that, and I think, and I support the artists that are trying to, make sure that gets to a better place. That said, like I mentioned earlier, I'm also the big part of my learning is to get in there and use these tools. So yes, when I started the podcast, I was like, here's how you use ChatGPT. Here's how you use Midjourney. And I was using Midjourney. But I develop opinions over time. I don't use Midjourney anymore. I don't have a subscription. I don't want to pay them for their service. But I do, like I said, I can, if I want to, I can generate some images locally on my machine with Stable Diffusion. I don't have to pay for it. However, I probably wouldn't. I would do it as more of like a learning thing. And I have been experimenting with something recently called Animate Diff, which like you can kind of turn on a webcam or video and you're moving around and in real time. It's like using Stable Diffusion to make a video. It's very cool. But so I have been experimenting locally with these things. But no, I'm not. As far as like actually putting out generated images, because most of the people that are doing that are of the opinion, and it's a different worldview that like this is their work, that that the prompting and yes, it does take time, maybe a couple hours even to get it just right or do these things, but they're sort of like, check out my work, check out my AI work. It's like, well, I don't necessarily view it as that's their work, right? It's like you prompted, and I get it, but the images that are coming out are based on the labor of a lot of people that are not happy about the current situation. So another thing I would like to say that we haven't talked about is sort of also the carbon footprint of a lot of these things. Like, so when one goes and uses Midjourney or any of these tools, there's a data center firing up and there's electricity and cooling and all of these things. And I get it. There's a carbon footprint for everything. You read a news article online, a data center is firing up. There's a carbon footprint. You do a Google search, but it's pretty obvious that these new tools are very thirsty for energy, like really thirsty. There's an article in the Atlantic. I'll send it to you. You can link up if you want. Where
absolutely, please do.
Yeah, she was like, hey, they used the Freedom of Information Act to try to get data about the energy consumption. I think it was in Arizona from some data centers. And, they send this documentation back and like all the stuff's blacked out, right? So it's kind of like they don't really but it doesn't take a genius to see, and there's a lot of data out there that talks about the energy consumption, but just look at the fact that OpenAI was like, hey, we have big plans, right? And we need there's this compute. We don't have enough chips. We don't have enough compute. And we want to, do some big things. And they're like, yeah, okay, Sam, you're a big thinker. Like, how much money are you asking for? Like $100 billion, $400 billion, $7 trillion, right? Like is what he threw out there. Mm-hmm. That's a lot of chips and data centers. And obviously like these, it's because these tools are so thirsty for energy. And that's very interesting that they're so I also think about like it's not just the what's in the model question. It's when you go and ask ChatGPT to make you a limerick or something, like think of it's probably taking a lot more energy than it is to do other things online. And I'm not saying don't do it. It's for everyone to make their own choice. But that also has to be a part of the conversation.
What do you see, consistently as the irreplaceable aspect, if there's one, because you might tell me, Juan, no, we're doomed. But like the irreplaceable aspect of human creativity, do you see anything, any beacon of hope for us human to add our condiment to the soup and create amazing content that resonates with society?
Yeah, I think, and this is a little romantic, it's all based on anecdotal, but I think like, the truly great art that people really identify with, most of it comes from places of suffering and from real like emotional experience, right? So that's why I view a lot of these things as, like I said, the next wave of automation, because I feel like you're still going to have humans figuring out how to maybe they type an idea and all the storyboards come out and all of this and so many things that like people had jobs to do like comes out automatically. But at the end of the day, it will not be like a fully polished product that they're going to put out and it's going to tug at the emotions of other humans if there's literally no human involved anywhere in the chain. So I do think there will always be somewhere for, a human to be part of the creative process. It's just that, some of the other parts are going to be automated. When another weird anecdote, I know I want to be conscious of time here, but when I moved to LA in 1998, I wanted to be an audio engineer and never became one, but I did go to a vocational school. And I was part of the very last class that they taught how to splice with tape with a razor blade. We also learned Pro Tools and learned digital audio workstations and the whole thing, but they were like, look, you guys, you're the last class we're going to teach this to. And yeah, it was totally cool to splice tape with the razor blade and play it back and be like, I cannot hear that. Like I made a seamless cut. Oh, it's amazing. And, we were putting reels of tape on these massive machines that are the size of like washing machines and refrigerators. But like, people don't want to go back to that. Some people do maybe, but like it is so much easier to use like non-linear editing digital audio workstations, how music is made now. And, a lot of people that were involved in making reels of tape at the factory, servicing these machines, like there was a huge disruption to the industry and that happens. So I do think that the big question you hear in like the AI circles is like, is it different this time? Like in the past, automation has always led to new types of work, right? Like they didn't know what a web developer was in 1962, but automation happens and now all of a sudden there's all these new jobs. And, maybe that's how it continues to go, or maybe there's, if you read these reports that come out from like World Economic Forum, Goldman Sachs, all these big reports, there's varying opinions. They all agree there's going to be disruption to hundreds of millions of jobs, but they don't really.
We see it now. We literally see it now.
Yeah, you see it now, but it's like, what is the disruption? Is it that people are going to, people will adjust? Again, I think what's really happening is it's uncomfortable because the rate of the change is also so quick compared to these other automation changes that happened in the past. So I think you're going to see a lot of people, including regulators and the governments, and people are just going to have to kind of come together and all like hold the steering wheel really hard and just sort of figure out how we get through this together. It's going to be it's awkward and uncomfortable, and it is a real change happening to society with this next chapter in automation, and it's happening faster than any other chapter happened before. And yeah, buckle up.
Yeah, what I always tell folks, when they ask me about AI, other folks that work in content creation, I usually say, I don't know what's going to happen. This could go either way. It'll probably be amazing. It'll probably be awful at the same time. But also, if anyone's telling you they know exactly what's going to happen, that's a scam artist. Like if they're probably trying to sell you a course or some crypto coin. But Scott, as we saw during this conversation, when it comes to creativity, creatives, we're sensitive people. So maybe things will have a bigger impact. And sometimes with all this change can always be terrifying. So it's very easy to go into the doomer aspect of things. But now, one thing that I usually like to ask folks that come here into the podcast, that are usually very creative and passionate folks. So that's kind of why I like doing this podcast. But it's like, this seems like a pain in the ass, like all the things going on. So why are you still passionate about creativity?
Oh, I mean, I don't know. How do you answer that? You're passionate about things that you're passionate about. You can't really choose what you're passionate about, right? It's just inside you. It's in your belly. You want to do things. So for me, I'm passionate about learning and being creative. Those are like I'm always wanting to learn. I think maybe there's like a fear of being left behind too. There is that, I'm not conscious of a lot of all of these all these issues we're talking about. But the last thing I want to do is stop learning, put up my hand and say like, oh, I reject this latest chapter of automation for X, Y, and Z and all these reasons. And then, be shut out of opportunities that are down the road. So I just feel like learning is I never want to stop learning, like my whole life. I always want to learn. So, and that's usually because I just always want to be involved. I want to be at the party. Like, hey, I want to I can contribute. I am knowledgeable about this or that or the other thing. How can I contribute? How can I be of meaningful service to society? Like if you stop learning, it sort of feels like, well, eventually you're
what's the point?
Yeah. So, creativity is a big part of that. And, I think I would just suppose I'll always be passionate about creativity and learning.
Scott, this has been an amazing conversation. You got the podcast AI Quick Bits that it's available on Spotify, at least. That's when I listen to it, but I'm assuming Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music,
Amazon, all of them. Yep,
the whole thing.
I don't do video like you. I just do audio only. But yes.
Well, I'm a content creator, so I was literally in my brain, I think, on repurposing because also, again, I started with a very small production. It was only 3 of us. So it's kind of like second nature. I look at a piece of content and I'm like, how am I going to repurpose this in as many ways as possible? But Scott, if people will definitely be curious about learning more about you after this episode and all your adventures. So besides the podcast, is there anywhere else where folks can find you, reach out to you?
Yeah, I'm really active on LinkedIn, like you said earlier. I think just because I feel like there are a lot of people there and not as many people talking. There are some, but the amount of interaction or impressions or, I just feel like it's easier to have meaningful experiences or go viral or whatever you want to call it on LinkedIn than it is on to cut through the noise on Twitter or X or Instagram or TikTok. So I'm on LinkedIn and like you mentioned, my podcast, and those are probably the two main areas that people would get to know me. Please connect with me on LinkedIn. Happy to.
We're going to add all the links. Folks, I definitely encourage you to check Scott's podcast. It's actually one of my favorite when it comes to AI because it gets technical, but, not so technical that as someone that is in creativity and in content, it will be hard to follow up. So definitely and also you have very interesting guests. So,
appreciate that.
Definitely recommend everyone. We'll put the link here on in the description, whether it's Spotify, Apple, YouTube. So, Scott, thank you so much for your time. I look forward to another conversation. What happens with these episodes is that I always feel like I have so many additional questions. The more they talk, the more I want to ask. So definitely down the line, I will put you in the spot right now, so you can't say no, but I will ask you to come back for a second round, and maybe going deeper in one of all the topics we covered today.
Would love to.
Appreciate you joining. Have an excellent week. And to the rest of you, remember to leave a review if you're listening on Spotify, Apple. That's always helpful. If you're on YouTube, a like, a comment. You don't even have to subscribe. YouTube will show it on your home feed after. So you should just, if you like it, we're good. So anyway, thank you all. We'll see you next week for a new episode of Creativity and Robots.
This was Creativity and Robots, episode 5. If you like these interviews, don't forget to like this video. We appreciate you watching all the way.